Welcome back to our channel, where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some significant news. Prince William secretly drops a line after catching Camilla's bad behavior to Prince George. The unusual act, which has generated a lot of trouble within the palace, was not triggered by political disagreements or a clash of royal duties. The successor to the realm, Prince George, was the one who set off the event. People who know say that a private talk between the little prince and Queen Camilla really upset the boy, which made his father, Prince William, very angry. By the end of that important day, the unspoken strain at Windsor was unbearable. Guests left quietly frequently with rumors that were linked to controversy and shock. The staff, who were good at being invisible, avoided eye contact, and their quick footsteps echoed off the old stone floor. Something had broken beyond repair. Prince William set a clear barrier within those medieval walls, not in sand, but in stone, that would not only break a fragile family tie, but also shake the very basis of his father's rule. This story of the breakup comes from talks with palace officials, royal analysts, and other people who know a lot about what happened. The story is about a father's impulse to protect a mother's fury that is kept in check, and a future king's decision that his family's honor should not be sacrificed for the sake of peace. The illusion of unity. The day began with all the signs of royal beauty. Under the beautiful morning light, Windsor Castle, a symbol of history and power, stood forth with its towers against a pale blue sky. The large courtyard was set up for a gathering meant to show unity, which was a big deal for both the public and the watchful media. King Charles III was there, and although he was plainly stressed out by his duties, he remained calm. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was as elegant as ever next to Prince William. She was a calming presence and a master of delicate diplomacy. Queen Camilla moved with grace in her well-put-together outfit. She smiled on purpose, and her eyes scanned the crowd as if she were judging each person and every look. Before the day's ceremonial rituals began, however, there were subtle signs almost impossible for an untrained viewer to see that the relationship between William and Camilla had already broken down beyond normal standards. Their greetings were polite, but not too emotional. Their discourse was short and to the point, without the fake civility that had hidden their real differences. Royal analysts who had been around for a while could have thought it was just the typical problems that come up when two households merge under the stress of the crown. But those who knew how the family worked viewed it as a bigger problem. This was the start of the storm. Prince George's behavior made things much more uncomfortable. The tiny heir, who generally had sparkling eyes and was curious, seemed especially sad throughout the ritual. He kept close to his mother, holding her hand with his small hands, and frequently lost interest in the people around him who were talking and laughing. The Princess of Wales watched. Yes, she always did. Her maternal instincts, honed by years of caring for youngsters under the most intense public scrutiny, detected a little but clear shift in his behavior. There was no time to ask because of the flashing cameras, the dignitaries waiting, and the close watch on everything that happened. She kept looking at him quietly, asking questions, since she could see something was wrong. William was watching too. That morning, he had already had a short, awkward conversation with Camilla. It was so quiet and brief that no one around could have understood what they were talking about. But you could see the effects on his face. His shoulders were tight, and his mouth was tight. His focus, which should have been on the ceremonial details, had shifted to something more important and urgent. Before noon, the staff at the castle began to spread rumors. Soft, yet sharp voices whispered about a secret discussion that left the young prince very upset. Even though no one stated it, the sections of the story began to mix together, hinting at a dangerous crossing of boundaries. The tone had changed drastically by the end of the event. The fake happy mood had changed into a stillness that hung in the halls like a heavy fog. The Prince and Princess of Wales leaving Windsor was something that had never happened before in contemporary history. There was no last handshake with the Queen, and they didn't even glance at her as they led their kids to the waiting car. William's behavior was hard to read, and his walk was steady, but the fact that he didn't recognize anybody screamed louder than anything he could have spoken. To understand why this day at Windsor was the turning point, you had to go back a few hours to the quiet, dark corridor where everything changed for Prince George. The words that ruined the peace people say that words may hurt more than a sword. Queen Camilla's alleged comments to Prince George in a private hallway at Windsor Castle, away from the media, and the public would leave a mark that no crown could hide. Sources who later pieced together what happened from staff and family accounts indicated that it was neither a joke nor an accident. The reply straightaway questioned the boy's identification and his place in the royal family. The moments before it didn't matter. Prince George may have left the main gathering to get away from the constant talking of adults and the stringent rules of the occasion. As he walked along a quieter hallway decorated with tapestries, the sounds of the party faded away. His little footsteps were lost in the deep silence of the castle's less frequented halls. He thought he was alone. He wasn't there. Queen Camilla came out of the dark hallway. At first she seemed calm and even casual, but there was a sharpness in her voice that George, who was accustomed to his parents' soothing tone and the staff's subservience, didn't recognize. At first it could have appeared like a simple conversation between an older king and a younger heir apparent. People say, nevertheless, that her advice didn't have the warmth that is typical of a grandmother's advice. They had heavy things to carry. She leaned a little and spoke softly, the type of soft that makes every syllable seem important. She is said to have said, "Your future in this family is not as certain as you might think." The statement was not made as a warning or advice. The story was told, according to later listeners, more like a statement without any feeling. Reports say that Prince George's eyes became bigger in confusion, but she didn't stop what she was doing at that time. She is said to have spoken about how things may change quickly, stressing that nothing in the monarchy is set in stone. She said that titles which are highly respected markers of royal identity might be taken away just as easily as they could be given. For a child raised in a bubble of safety, these weren't simply words. They caused a mental breakdown. At that point, the idea that the monarchy was an unbreakable inheritance fell apart. George was unsure whether to say what he was thinking or stay quiet. His young mind, which wasn't ready for such a complicated and evil idea, had a hard time understanding what he had just seen. There was no smile, no courteous correction to lessen the impact, only the constant chill of the notion that his position may be taken away from him and that he might not be destined for the job he thought he was going to get. Not long later, a royal aide observed him at the end of the corridor, with his head down and his hand quickly wiping away his tears. The attendant, who knew the palace's unspoken rules about privacy, didn't ask any questions. Discretion is a way for the royal family to stay alive. But they would never forget the image of the young prince who had lost his composure. After that, as the reports began to circulate, it was clear that they had witnessed the immediate effects of an extremely scary incident. When George came back to the main hall, those who knew him well could see that he was a little shaky. His mother spotted it instantly. A mother's gut feeling. A father's decision. A mother's instinct is a basic force that is always right and quick. The Princess of Wales knew right away that her son had been harmed without needing to hear it from him. George's avoidance of her eyes and his tiny frame bending toward her showed that he needed steadiness in the face of uncertainty. He stayed close by, and his voice was absent from the happy talks going on around him. His eyes moved about the room as if looking for a place to escape from the day's troubles. Catherine's heart tightened. No matter what it was, it had become deeper than a passing childhood problem. It had an effect on something fragile and important. When she found a moment of peace, she knelt down a little to his level and spoke softly, but firmly. "George, what happened?" At first he was hesitant. He opened his mouth and then closed it again as if the words were too heavy to say. However, beneath his mother's steady, soothing face, the reality began to emerge in disconnected fragments. He spoke of how Camilla suddenly appeared in the calm hallway, how sharp her tone was, and how disturbing it was to learn that his place in the monarchy was not as assured as he had thought. He spoke the most scary thing that had stuck in his young mind like a thorn: titles can be taken away. Catherine felt a terrifying rage that she quickly hid from her child. She gave him a little nod, which was a tacit sign that he was safe and innocent. But underneath the calm surface, her drive became stronger. This wasn't just a passing remark. She thought this was a planned assault, no matter what Camilla's plans were. Catherine knew how fragile a child's self-esteem might be, especially one who had been raised near a throne. These comments were not simply foolish, they were also harmful. Catherine pledged from the moment she became a mother that no one, no matter who they were, would ever be able to injure her children. When an assistant came up to her, she looked at them and made a little motion for them to talk. The assistant confirmed her previous concerns when they were alone. They encountered Prince George not long after the supposed conversation. His eyes were wet, and he was acting quite upset. That was all the proof Catherine needed. The picture was finished. At this point, there was no way to do it wrong. She walked up to William and whispered, so that only he could hear what she said. "This is the end of today." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decision. He could tell right away that her voice had a slight firmness. It was the same tone she used when she was sure of her choice and understood what she wanted to do. William paid close attention as she told George's story, which was backed up by the aide's observations. With every piece of information, he became more and more serious. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed not in confusion, but in firm conviction. There was no question and no thought given to how it might affect politics. At that moment, the decision became clearer, not only as a father protecting his child, but also as a future king deciding what would be allowed in his kingdom. William may have been patient. He may have asked for a private meeting with his father. But what happened next turned a tense family gathering into a public royal fight that everyone could see. As William addressed Camilla, the mood in Windsor's fancy hall changed, and everyone turned to look at the storm that was building in the middle of the room. The fight in the grand hall. The polite conversation became quieter, and an oppressive tension appeared to close in on the walls. William walked forward with a steady, determined stride, his eyes on Camilla moving through the crowd, as if he didn't see anybody else. Camilla was talking to a group of lesser royals when she glanced up and smiled slightly. The smile faded right away as she saw his face. When his voice came out, it was calm and measured. It was the type of calm that is far more dangerous than high-pitched tones. "What made you want to talk to my son?" The comments were planned, but they were really cutting. The crowd surrounding them became quiet. People stopped talking all of a sudden. Forks stopped halfway to the plates. The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Camilla tilted her head, and a note of disdain crept into her voice. "I was just giving him a dose of reality, William." She replied, her voice light and dismissive, as if the problem was too little for the weight he gave it. William, on the other hand, kept his eyes on the prize. At that time, the future king was not just fighting with a family member, he was also protecting the heir to the throne from a hurt that was worse than any political insult. William's voice rose high enough to break through the heavy silence. "He is my son," he said. "Not your chess piece." The words hit like a gavel. Everyone gasped at the same moment, which showed that they knew a line had been crossed in real time. Camilla's lips became tight. She let out a short, shocked laugh and shook her head as if to completely dismiss what he said. "You are too sensitive." She continued each word, dripping with an air of superiority. "This is the truth. He needs to understand it." William, on the other hand, didn't want to hear lectures that pretended to be guidance. His jaw tightened, his shoulders straightened, and his eyes showed a piercing intensity that made it clear he wouldn't let this go unchecked. "Your lessons are not about my son's well-being. You will not talk to him like that again." Always. King Charles moved closer from across the room, his face showing stress as he struggled to balance his duties as a father and as a monarch. "William." He began trying to sound calm like a mediator, but the effort fell apart when he saw how determined his eldest kid was. William stayed strong. He kept looking straight ahead. It was a subtle but clear warning that neither royal process nor parental power would change his mind. Catherine stood next to him and didn't say anything. But her silence made it clear that this wasn't only William's decision. It was theirs. Her look didn't change, and her posture didn't change either. The vast hall, which was usually a place for polite behavior, suddenly became a place for something raw, primitive, and permanent. People who were watching knew that this was not a little fight. This was a break that could never be fixed once it became bigger. The hierarchy, tradition, and fake sense of unity all shook when a father became angry. Then came the moment that proved the break. William straightened up straight, and his voice was low yet echoed around the room. He added, "From this day forward, my family and I will not have any more contact with you other than what the law requires. This conversation is over. We are too." A murmur went across the room, but it was quickly silenced by the severity of the news. The quiet was broken by gasps. The assistants looked at each other with worry. This was a public severance, a line that could not be crossed even by the monarchy itself. Camilla's attitude changed to one of steely resolve. The fight was over, but the effects were only beginning. The palace in trouble, different stories, and a prince's refusal. The castle does well by being in charge, but when word of the catastrophe in Windsor began to spread, that control slipped away like water through firmly clenched fists. The halls of power went into a state of emergency. Senior advisors were quickly called together, and they gathered in small, quiet groups that looked worried. They had a clear but difficult goal to write a unified public statement to limit the damage before it turned into a full-blown crisis. Still, even during those conversations about the problem, there was no way to bring everyone together. The king's team was the first to come up with a plan, the misunderstanding scenario. They proposed a careful phrasing of the Queen and Prince George's conversation, emphasizing its taken out of context and regrettably misinterpreted nature. Their goal was to downplay the incident by making it seem like a private family matter that had been blown out of proportion. William, on the other hand, did not think the interpretation was a mistake. He refused to hide it under diplomatic niceties, since it was a betrayal. Through his communications department, he made it clear that he would not participate in any such article. He would not allow pictures that pretended to be normal, and he would not allow any comments that downplayed how serious the situation was. This refusal caused a dangerous split in the royal system. The story of misunderstanding was pointless from the start, since the Prince of Wales didn't help. The media began leaking information, but not from outside sources. It came from different groups inside. Whispers purportedly from the Queen's loyalists depicted her as a benevolent step-grandmother who misinterpreted her words. On the other hand, others were far less kind, saying that George had been upset and that the Princess of Wales had been overtly enraged. The many stories of what happened caused a media frenzy. Headlines went from being quiet to making wild guesses about a deepening rift in the monarchy. As time went on, something unexpected happened. More and more people were supporting William and Catherine. Families all across the world heard about a little boy's pain. In William's anger, parents saw their own protective tendencies flare. Discreetly ordered internal polls showed that public perception had changed a lot. A large majority agreed that William behaved as any other father would, no matter what his status was. The story had gotten away from the palace's control. No press release could change the powerful image of a father protecting his child. The final word, a letter and a public disdain. Prince William chose a more official and long-lasting tool in the days that followed, when the chaos stopped and the Cold War began. A letter. He spoke to Camilla not as a son-in-law but as the Prince of Wales, making his point obvious. People say that the letter opened with a clear statement. He was ending all personal connections. He made it clear that his most important duty above all others was to protect his successor. He said that the duty didn't change because of royal politeness or respect for higher grades. He refused to meet with him again in private, saying that any necessary connections must be formal, watched, and responsible. The next statement ended all chance of reconciliation. Some lines once crossed can never be redrawn. It wasn't an angry comment. It was one that meant it could never be changed. The letter's existence eventually became known to the public, turning the private severance into a public fight. But the final confirmation of the split came weeks later on a cold morning outside St. George's Chapel, the heart of Windsor. The senior royals got together for a ceremonial ceremony. The occasion was the first time since the incident that William and Camilla would be in the same public area. You could feel the stress. As the royal procession got closer to the chapel entrance, the walkway became narrower, bringing them closer to the door. Many camera clicks captured the moment when Prince William and Queen Camilla met. There was no nod, no glance, and no spark of recognition. They moved forward, as if the other were a ghost, their eyes fixed on somewhere far away. Photographers did an impressive job of capturing it, the unchanging look, the stiff posture, and the deliberate avoidance. They were placed in the chapel with a clear space between them. Afterwards, lip readers hired by the media stated that William was observed talking gently to Catherine with his jaw tense, saying the words, "Maintain distance." The one photograph of the future king and the queen consort sitting in quiet became the most famous image of the Windsor collapse. The day the monarchy's carefully built facade of unity fell apart, revealing the harsh reality underneath the crown. The chapter ended not with peace, but with a silence that will echo through royal history for years to come. The line that was drawn at Windsor was final for the Prince of Wales. His only requirement is that he protect his child and the future he represents. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.